Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where when you hear this sound, it's the sound of a squirrel licking its whisker at the top of a gigantic mountaintop on an island no one's ever visited. You know this is the post-tech edition of the bathtub. It's just like the pre-tech edition, only it's much later. So it comes later than the pre-tech edition, but it's the exact same concept. No tech, no high tech. We're not doing the whiteboard. We're not doing all the special effects that made the show so preposterous for so many decades. Just me, the least pixelated. It's like all real me and no pixels. And there's real Dodo over there. I left the door open if she wants. She never wants to see us anymore. And we've got a few things to talk about. One thing I want to talk about is I've been threatening this for a long time, but we're closing in on 3,000 subscribers. We're doing it really, really slowly, and it's basically a race to climate apocalypse, the second Trump administration, and us hitting 3,000 subscribers, and it's neck and neck. I don't know who's going to win, but I'm crossing my fingers it's the 3,000 subscriber show, so we can have a real big exciting show. And I think we're going to try to do a live call-in, or I don't think we'll have call-in, maybe type-in sort of thing where everyone can type to each other and say hi to our bathing buddies around the world. That's the big plan. Anyway, got lots of plans here at the bathtub, lots of plans. And it reminds me, we have the International Bathing Alliance. Don't forget, your loved ones, anyone you know, all you need to do is just tell me, tub me up, Master Bather. I put your name on a Google map and say some smart ass thing about it, and then you have a license to bathe anywhere in the universe, anywhere in the known universe. We can't cover the unknown universe. We don't promise that. We're having Spring Mountain water today. Celebrate the post-tech edition. No alcohol, no fake substances, except for Dodo singing. We're going to talk about my old friend Avram Davidson. We've been kind of reading him once in a while. We're doing two things. We're kind of going back and reading Avram's stuff, mainly rereading old stuff, but we have a new book to talk about. And then reading the year 1964, when Avram edited Fantasy and Science Fiction. So that's what we're going to do in a few minutes. Beer, beer, beer. Part of my youth. I remember when Avram wrote this novel, I was living right across the street from him, practically in the Richmond district of San Francisco, and I think it was then that he gave me the book. So I must have been 18 or 19 years old. He gave me this manuscript. He decided he wanted to write some non-science fiction fantasy because he wasn't making much money, old Avram, writing all these kind of brilliant and incredibly complicated books. So he thought he'd try to write something more realistic, and he wrote Beer, Beer, Beer. He gave me one of the. Avram used to type on like we all did on carbon copy paper. It was like he must have been triplicates. I think he did 3 copies. He had it whole down to an art. I remember. And then he would type them at one page, and then he would type in additions and scribble stuff in. It was really hard to read, but Avram gave it to me, and I did enjoy it. And then, many decades and decades later, I remember talking to somebody or thinking about Avram, and I wondered what happened to that manuscript and who was taking care of it, which is when I went through a kind of circuitous little thing of daisy chain of people. Probably started with Gordon Van Gelder at the FNSF, since he's the only person I know who knows anybody. And he eventually got me in contact with Seth Davis. And we've talked about Seth here, and I was on his. We kind of swapped podcasts once or twice, and Seth was his godson, and Avram's son was named. We used to call him Frodo. His name was Ethan now, and his mother was Grania Davis, terrific writer. Seth and Frodo and Ethan's mom was Grania Davis, a wonderful novelist and writer who helped keep Avram's work alive after Avram died. Too young, we're sorry to say. So that's a long story, but eventually I got a hold of Seth, and we exchanged a few emails. Very nice guy, very smart guy. And he was working on the manuscript of Beer, 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 and that was the title I remembered. I kept asking people, what happened to Beer, Beer, Beer? And they said, I don't know anything about it. But Seth found it. He published it within a few months almost of me talking to him. And it just came out, it was just a few months ago, but it took me a while to get around to rereading Beer, Beer, Beer. Avram's science, it's not a fantasy science fiction. There's a slightly, they say a magic realistic idea about where the beer is actually coming from in the story. But basically, it's a picture of Avram's home city of Yonkers. I hope I'm getting this right. It's Yonkers, where Avram was raised, and they don't call it Yonkers here. They call it something else, and I forget now already what they call the damn place. He gives it a different name there. Oh, Yoakams, New Jersey. And it's like everything Avram wrote, filled with lots of different ideas, filled with these kind of beautiful visual set pieces, lots of memory, lots of historical associations, kind of a sentence that will go on and on with making connections between so many different things and making so many different jokes that by the time you get to the end of some of these sentences, you forgot how the sentence started. But basically, it's a really, really fun book about this period when, during Prohibition, there's all the characters named. The only thing I don't like about it, I wish he just called it Yonkers, and there's a guy who's like Dutch Schultz in it, and they call him Dutch Stoltz. I remember Avram talking about Dutch Schultz a lot when I was a kid. And so, again, changing it to Dutch Stoltz. And other than that, that's the only thing I criticize about the book, is I wish he had just told the real names of all these people. But it's about how it's during Prohibition, everybody's dying for a drink. They produce something called near beer, which they still have in New York. Last time I was there, it's like under ages you can have near beer, which is very, very weak alcohol content beer. And somehow in the middle of it all, there's all these different characters. There's the mayor, and there's the opening scene is this just young kid about Avram's age going to buy candy at all the little candy shops. That's just some of my favorite stuff. It's just the memories of all these things that Avram remembers as a child. And all the different characters that come into. There's a newspaper guy and his girlfriend. And I can't even remember. There must be 36 characters. Dutch Stoltz and his wife. And in the beginning of the book, they're going into like a sewage area somewhere. I didn't quite understand the way Yonkers is struck. The way he's describing it is it's basically built over all these different sewage entrances and exits. And they're down there working on cleaning something up. And they find a huge pipe which starts dispensing beer, sudsy beer. And all the workmen and everybody goes down there and starts to get drinking and getting drunk and having a really good time. This pipe starts showing up at different places. But basically it's sort of a gimmick that kind of gives us a picture of this huge complicated life, a city life that obviously Avram writes about with some affection and some great humor. I'm just going to read one or two very quick passages to give you a quick idea of how Avram writes. And one of them, this is a typical humor, Avram's humor. It's about these three Italian guys, basically gangsters, sitting down to eat. And he describes how they eat when they get... One of them is Dutch Schultz, I think. None of the three had been bred up as a delicate feeder. So the chief sounds for quite a while were those of mastication and gobbling. Eructation and flatulence would come later. The stuffed olives, plain green olives, and wrinkled black Greek olives came first, followed by celery sticks inlaid with cream, cheese, and olives, or, for those who had perhaps had enough of olives, plain old cream cheese, plus cream cheese with chives. There were pickled tomatoes, too. Coleslaw. Then there was soup, good, solid chicken soup, made with entire chickens with onions and fresh dill. And dumplings. Chicken feet, too, had been employed to strengthen the broth, the feet well cleaned and then dipped in scalding water to loosen the skin, which, with a few deft digs of her small knife, Mary had peeled off like so much glove. She had learned that in America, unlike her native Banat, the chicken feet themselves were removed before the soup went to the high table. So she ate them herself, with only at first a shrug, and always with many a slobber and a smack. There were also a few marrow bones. Boykin alone spread the marrow on bits of bread. The others simply sucked the succulent stuff out. All the visualizations, all the detail, that's just one meal being described. I wanted to read a couple passages, but I don't know if I really have time because I want to talk about a few things. But there's one thing about the Judge Boodle family, which is great. Anyway, it was A Labor of Love by Seth Davis, but it's actually really a lovely novel, particularly if you're interested in kind of American, not I don't want to say ethnic culture, but just the medley of ethnic lives occurring in Yonkers at this time of American history. Very funny, very beautiful, and very specific about all the different types of people living in this, I guess, an amazing place. I don't know. I think I went to Yonkers years and years ago. I had some friends there, and I went and visited. I recall having a night out with some people in Yonkers, but it may have been May have been some marijuana or something. I don't know. I was smoking. Finally, so I read along with it. I was reading in the past few weeks. I read the January issue of Fantasy and Science Fiction that Avram had edited. There's so many things I enjoyed about it. The first story in it is by Mac Reynolds, a writer I don't really know well, but he was a friend of Avram's, and it actually features in one of Avram's novels, Clash of Star Kings. And it's kind of politically a very astute, funny story about a guy who basically goes around the world. He's a pacifist, and he goes around going up to people, weapons manufacturers or politicians who sell out to weapons manufacturers, i.e. our almost entire government. And he goes around and he either threatens to stop them from doing anything that would cause a war, he threatens to kill them. He's a spy for good people. He's a pacifist, and he's part of this network of pacifists. It was a very interesting, not short story, which I liked a lot. And I haven't read a lot of Mac Reynolds. I've read some, but he was a very unusual writer for that time. And I guess probably the only Marxist science fiction writer I can think of off the top of my head, except maybe Kim Stanley Robinson. There's another interesting little story. This is what FNSF did all the time, particularly then. They would bring some genre writers, but then the second story is by a Russian writer, which has been translated to called Starlight Rhapsody, which is kind of a poetic story about listening to the stars, listening to music from the stars. A story by a guy named Wenzel Brown, I never heard of before, but quite a smart, clever, kind of horror-ish story about a man who goes out, who has an empty life, and he goes out, he starts following a man, and that man seems to have an empty life and wants to be followed. And I won't go very further than that, but it's almost a parable. It's a little Ligotti-ish in a way, and a good short story. My favorite part of these old FNSFs are Avram's books columns, and this was really a cool books columns because he has three different writers giving fairly brief discussions of different books. One of them's Avram, and who makes perfectly good. He's a very good reviewer, actually, Avram, on some interesting books. Then Marion Zimmer Bradley talks about Jack London's The Star Rover, which is being reintroduced, and she's really a bright woman. I've never read her fiction, but I liked it. And then they got Fritz Leiber, the great Fritz Leiber, reviewing The Dunwich Horror and others. Actually, I have this damn book. I'll show it to you. We're going to talk about Lovecraft in the next episode, and he's reviewing this book. Isn't that a cool little book? And in the course of it, I can't think of any writer who is probably more I don't know what you call it, inundated with or overloaded with fascinating esoteric information than Fritz Leiber and Avram Davidson. And he picks a little fight with Avram in here, which Avram graciously allows him to pick with him about some details. I really enjoy these book reviews. The second half of it is The Tree of Time by Damon Knight. And I read the first half when I started this lame project many, many months ago now. It's kind of like if Damon Knight, if A.E. Van Vogt could write good sentences, he might have written The Tree of Time. It reminds me, there's like the central character doesn't know who he really is, and then he finds out he's involved in some intergalactic something or other, and there's a spaceship that's gone from one time to another. I'll be honest with you, I forgot the first half. I read the summary. A lot of the story has happened just before the novel started in the first section. Anyway, it's the second half of a serial, and I sort of read, to be honest with you, I got completely confused by it. It really got me confused. Another story confused me was called Thaw and Serve by Alan Kim Lang. I still don't know what happened with that. And then there was a few other stories that were okay. Edward Welland, kind of a regular there, and Robert Laurie. Anyway, it's fun reading these old issues, and Avram did have a really good eye for fiction. He had a really put together a nice package, particularly with the book sections, and there's always an Isaac Asimov essay about science, which I can never finish. And that's it. It was really fun. I'm going to keep reading through those as we read Avram's books. Anyway, this went too long. Happy bathing, and we're going to do a little quick one on Lovecraft shortly. Okay.